Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to this special live edition of Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. We are just 2 days away from the Florida primary, and there are a number of important races on the ballot, including sheriff's races in Miami-Dade and Broward, and a county mayor's race in Miami-Dade where Danielle Levine-Cava is up for re-election and hoping to avoid a runoff election in November. We'll also look ahead to November when both marijuana and abortion rights are on the ballot. But I want to get us started by going out to the early voting site at Miami-Dade election headquarters in Doral. Steve Magiri is there for us. Steve, good morning. All right, today is the last day of early voting in both Miami-Dade and Broward. When I looked at the numbers early this week, it didn't seem like a lot of people were taking advantage of early voting or voting by mail. Is that still the case?
Good morning, Jim. It absolutely is. If you really take a look at the number of people that have registered to vote in Miami-Dade County and Broward County, even statewide, you can see that in our two counties here in South Florida, only a fraction of people are really taking advantage of early voting. We've got a full breakdown of the numbers. So let's start out with Miami-Dade County. For mail-in ballots in Miami-Dade County, you can see more Democrats have chosen to mail in their ballots than Republicans or those that are unaffiliated. And for early voting in person, it's a different story. More Republicans voted in person than Democrats or the unaffiliated voters. And now let's head up to Broward County. For mail-in ballots, more Democrats mailed in their votes than the Republicans or the unaffiliated voters. And it was the same for those that voted early in person. Democrats have just sent in more votes in either form in Broward County. Now, back live here, the polling centers have just opened here in Miami-Dade County. It's important to note that the hours are different depending on which county. It runs from 8 to 4 here in Miami-Dade County and 10 to 7 up in Broward County. And in our next half hour, Jim, we're going to have a full breakdown of the voter registration numbers. That's coming up in just a bit. But for now, let's send it back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Joining me now to discuss the primary is, well, we've got the Republican Party chair for Miami-Dade County, Alex Rizo, and we also have Chevron Jones, the Democratic Party chair. He's coming in by Zoom. We caught him in transit. He was trying to get his way to the DNC. You know the Democrats are having a big party in Chicago.
I heard something
about that. And so we sort of caught him in transit, and so hopefully we'll be able to get him on. Chev, can you hear us? Well, we'll see. There he is. Good morning, Chevron Jones. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Good to hear from you, Jim, and good to see you, Alex.
All right. Well, I just want to sort of start with, before we turn to election stuff, and I want to talk about some of those numbers and why people aren't really turning out, but I did want to talk about some news that happened this week with Senate President Kathleen Passidomo basically ruling out a special session to deal with the crisis, some people believe, with condo associations because of the laws that were passed post-Surfside requiring condominiums to bring up their reserve funds. As a result, a lot of folks are getting hit with very high, steep assessments to bring up those reserves. The Senate president said there will be no special session. They'll deal with it in regular session. You're hearing from constituents. I know you don't have a lot of condos in your area, Alex, but tell me what you think. Should there be a special session?
No, I don't think so. I agree with Senator Passidomo, and certainly the same thought has been expressed by incoming Speaker Perez, that we should wait. We should let the law actually pass out, go through its motions. Right now, those special assessments, there are no special assessments because of that law. Those would actually start to go in after these inspections go through. Starting next year is when, if there is a case for it, then there's certain parameters within the law that would allow for sometime after 2025. That's when that would happen. So, there is some concern about it, absolutely, and all of our offices, every single representative, every single senator in Miami-Dade County is getting calls saying, look, we'd like to, have you kind of assess this law and see what's going on. You talked about a timeline. That's the first thing that people talk about. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion during committee weeks and possibly during session about it.
I want to bring Senator Jones in. Senator, I'm sure you're getting some angry phone calls as well to your office about what may be on the horizon. Should there be a special session?
No, I absolutely, this is one thing I think Alex and I would absolutely agree on. I think doing a special session right now, I think it's too early. I think the law just passed. We have to just implement it. We have to wait and ensure that what we've implemented, that as it goes through, that we do everything that's needed. So when we do come back, we know what those kinks that need to be created. We knew from the beginning that when we went into this, that there were some things that we're going to have to change. We also realized that we will fall into a situation to where we're going to have different associations feeling this type of heat. But we also realized that we were going to have to come back and make those changes when we've come back to into the legislative session. So I agree with the Senate President. I don't think it's the right time to do a special session. I think that we need to wait. We need to make sure that we can take in all the information that's needed, so when we come back in March, that we can make those necessary changes and we're not just piecemealing things together.
All right, Chev, I want to keep you up for a second and sort of talk about, let's turn to the election, the primary. We had a report a couple minutes ago. Numbers are down. I mean, when you look at them, especially compared to 2020 numbers, I was looking at that a little bit more in depth. About half as many people have been taking advantage of early voting or mail-in voting on the Democratic side than they did in 2020. On the Republican side, the Republicans are almost matching their numbers from 2020. I realize some of that is COVID-related. Democrats got used to voting early, got used to doing mail-in voting, but I don't get the sense that there's a lot of excitement about this year's election right now, at least for the primary. Give me your take.
Well, here's the thing. I think there's quite a few things that's at play right now. I think there's voter confusion. I think there's voter apathy. I think there's lack of engagement. I think it's a mixture of quite a few things. And also, to add icing to the cake, I said the legislature knew exactly what they were doing when my colleagues proposed and passed Senate Bill SB 90 and SB 7050. When you had Senate Bill SB 90, which passed post 2020, which placed restrictions on third-party voter registration efforts, would require Florida ID and Social Security numbers to update registration numbers and things of that nature. And when you're looking at these different things that happen, it's no surprise to me that we're looking at the voter numbers that we're looking at right now. But here's what I will tell you. I think we have today, there's a great deal of souls to the polls that's happening across the county in Miami-Dade County to where we will have a great deal of people who will come out. And I think those numbers will absolutely change. But it doesn't help that the legislature passed such restrictive voting laws in the last two cycles.
On to the idea of the legislature passing restrictive voter ID laws and the rest of it. So go ahead.
Sure. Well, being there along with my colleague, Senator Jones in Tallahassee, I can tell you there's nothing restrictive about it. What it was, what we had to do was actually create a better system to go ahead and vote. Now, we've had a lot of people come into Florida the last few years. We have an uptick in registration of all voters, really. The Democratic Party, not so much. The Republicans, yes, we finally got to that 1 million voter mark above where the Democrats are. And here in Dade County, the Democratic Party has lost 20% over the last 4 years. Nothing that the senator talked about had anything to do with that. We are now in historic territory. The Republican numbers, and I don't know what the last number is after the closeout of the numbers last week, but we were at about 50,000 less than the Democrats. That is amazing. The Democratic Party has lost numbers. The Republican Party has increased numbers. And again, I think that we're even closer than we were back 2 years ago. I think we're going to see a red wave once more in Miami-Dade.
So, Alex, let me stick with you for that because it goes nicely into one of my questions. I realize the county mayor's race is a nonpartisan race, but everyone knows Danielle Levine Cava is a Democrat and, has visited the White House and all the rest of it and is often cited by President Biden. It doesn't seem like the Republicans, for all the strength that you claim in Miami-Dade County, really put up much of a campaign to try to take her out. Why is that?
Part of that may be because it is a nonpartisan race. We've got a lot of people that are looking at making a selection. Now, on our side, on the Republican side, even though, like you said, it is an MPA race, we have a lot more Republicans running against her. So imagine that's a lot more of a choice that you're going to see. Let's see. We hope that there will be. We think that there will be a runoff later on.
You think there's going to be a runoff?
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Wait a second. I hear Chev laughing in the background. So, Chev, do you think there's going to be a runoff in the Cava race?
There would not be a runoff in the Mayor Danielle Levine Cava race. The mayor has done an exceptionally amazing job. That's why she has this bipartisan support that we're seeing right now. And so I think she'll be fine. But I do want to say, I want to push back just that bit, Jim, on my colleague. Listen, the Republicans, they're taking this victory lap on the manufactured voter registration lead, but that's all at the expense of 886,000 registered Democratic voters who have been excluded for the role. So this victory lap that the Republicans are taking, I mean, is all a farce, because all of these numbers are not based on the individuals who've been removed from the role, and many of them don't even know that now that their voting registration says inactive, many of them think that they're no longer registered just because of the way that it's worded. So again, there's no victory lap the Republicans should take. If they played by the rules, I promise you we would not see a million voter registration number the victory lap that they're taking right now.
Chev, I want to stay with you. Chev, I want to stay with you for a second and just sort of, Miami-Dade is now transitioning to this, constitutional officer system with partisan races for sheriff, for supervisor of elections, for some of the other seats. Do you think that was a good idea? I mean, I realize you can't go back. It was a constitutional amendment in 2018. I tend to think it was something pushed by the Florida Sheriff's Association because they didn't like that Miami-Dade had its own independent police force as opposed to something that was part of the Sheriff's Association. But do you like this idea of partisan races for election supervisor, for sheriff, for those sort of seats?
Well, listen, I think for the sheriff, Broward County have had an elected sheriff for quite some time. And I know Miami-Dade County is moving into that as so is the entire state. I'm not saying that whether it's a good idea or the bad idea. At the end of the day, if you're dealing with public safety, that should not be a partisan issue. Just like our school board races. Our school board races should not be a partisan issue, although it has turned into partisan because that's just the political climate that we are in right now. And so considering that, you play with the cards that you're dealt. Here's what I will say is that as we are in those constitutional officers who are running, my hope is that they will remember that although you might have this D or this R behind your name, you're dealing with millions of people with the hopes that they don't care what your party is, that they want to make sure that their taxes are done the right way. They want to make sure their children are learning, and they want to make sure that they are able to vote without any restrictions. So my hope is that that people will look at that. I hope that the legislature make no other changes that need to be made when it comes to our constitutional offices. But here's where we are right now.
All right, Chev, let me jump in. So I want to give you a chance to talk about the idea of moving to these partisan races for sheriff, for supervisor of elections. The supervisor of elections one, I'll be honest with you, worries me a little bit. I don't know that running our elections should be in the hands of either a partisan. Right? What is your take on what we're doing now in terms of moving forward with these partisan races?
Well, I agree with the people of Miami-Dade County when they voted to have these constitutional offices, number one. Number two, every single one of us that's a public servant comes to the job that we choose to run for, that we've been elected for, with a sense of a compass needle. And it doesn't matter which way, if it's conservative, if it's progressive. In the public sphere, you've got to serve, and you've got to serve well. Now, there's mechanisms in place, and people will see what goes on. So when it comes to, for example, with supervisor of elections, we'll see. If it goes one way or another, and that person is skewing the Department of Elections, the largest in the southeastern United States, one way or another, the people will get to choose every 4 years whether they agree with that person or they disagree with that person.
Unless they've rigged the system so that it can't be ever get voted out. Chev, I'm going to give you the last word since you're about to head to the airport to get on a plane for Chicago. Tell me about how excited are you to have Kamala Harris on the top of the ticket as opposed to Joe Biden right now, and what kind of energy do you think you're going to see in Chicago?
Hey, listen, here's what I would say, that we thank the president. The president did an exceptional job. We look at the economy right now. The economy is the way that it is because of President Biden and his partner in this work, and that's Vice President Kamala Harris. The switch happened. The switch was good for the party. The switch was good for this country. We see the momentum that's happening. You see the Vice President and Governor Walz, who are now traveling the country, letting the people know how they want to maintain keeping the soul of this nation, as the president has touted over the past few years. I will absolutely say, that what we're seeing right now is monumental. I think that what we're seeing is that people are looking for us to get back to a place to where we are governing, moving away from this MAGA extremism that we're seeing, and that's why the Republican Party are seeing the fall off that they're seeing from their own party. Just yesterday, the vice president had a call with over 70,000 Republicans who said that they are voting for Kamala Harris. This is people people who are putting this country over party. And I'm so happy that we're seeing this. And I'll end with this, that it is not by accident that right here in the state of Florida, we have over 20,000 people who have signed up to volunteer. That's not a farce. That is not people who are apathetic to what we've been seeing. That is people who are sick and tired of what the Republicans have been producing here within the state of Florida.
Chev, I gotta cut you. I gotta cut you there. It's okay.
We're excited.
I want to make sure you catch your plane so that you're in Chicago on time. And I'm going to give Alex a chance to come back in the next half hour and say all the reasons why he thinks you're wrong. So there you go. All right, let's take our first break here. When we come back, we will continue our conversation with two of South Florida's best political reporters, the Miami Herald's David Smiley and the Sun Sentinel's Steve Busquet. Stay with us. Welcome back to the special live edition of Facing South Florida. Let's bring in a couple of veteran political reporters. David Smiley is the political editor for the Miami Herald, and Steve Busquet is the editorial page editor and columnist for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in. I do want to start, should we be surprised there isn't a lot of excitement about the primary election that's taking place right now? We're not seeing huge numbers really turning out. Steve, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, although if present trends continue, the turnout in Broward, at least, is going to be below what it was at the height of the pandemic. So people were able to get mail-in ballots in 2020 in a way they're not getting it today. Now, the effort by the Republicans in Tallahassee, they plotted to make it more difficult to get a mail-in ballot. They're going to say they didn't do that. They did. And so it's having an effect. The question is going to be, this is going to be a very big deal in the general election. I'm using round numbers. In Broward and Dade, you should have about 500,000 vote by mail ballot requests.
Well, I can tell you right now, for instance, in Broward County, among Democrats, in 2020, the total number of mail-in ballots cast was almost 150,000. As of Saturday morning, it was 57,000 had been returned. So almost a third. Right. So it's a very low number.
Yep, and it's as you know, it's.
So you think it's more of a function of them being access to the mail-in ballot? In other words, it's not automatically being sent. You have to request it. They put in more restrictions along that way.
Right. And it is easy to get a mail-in ballot, and I think the supervisors of election have done a pretty good job of constantly pounding this reminder on their websites and in social media and elsewhere. You've got to request a mail ballot. You've got to request a mail ballot. There's not much interest in a primary election. There hasn't been down here for a long, long time. That's just the way it is, but I think it'll change in November.
David, I want to bring you in. What's your take on the turnout?
I agree with Steve. If you look at turnout for August primary elections in Florida in 2020, politics were juiced. Everybody was at home stuck talking about politics because of the pandemic, and we had, 28% vote in the primary. Mail ballots are proven to increase turnout in low turnout elections, and the legislature decided to basically wipe all the requests at the start of the 23 year. And the supervisors of elections have been saying for months that it was a problem, that mail ballot requests were way down. Mail ballot requests are at 50% of what they were previously. That's true statewide, and as a result, the turnout's down. That's not the only reason, but I think it's the main reason.
All right, I want to turn to some of the races. Let's stay with you, David, here in Miami-Dade. You heard me ask, why didn't the Republicans try to, if they got all this juice going on, to use your word, in Miami-Dade, all this energy that they've got in Miami-Dade, all these numbers that they're putting up in Miami-Dade, why didn't they try to take out the big Democratic dog in Miami-Dade?
What's the famous Michael Jordan quote about politics? Republicans buy sneakers too. Republicans need county hall approvals too. And the power of incumbency is real. Daniela Levine Cava is an incumbent. And when you have guys like Ken Griffin donating $500,000 to her campaign, that's money that's not going to the other side. I also think it's a little tricky for Republicans having Alex Otaola on the ballot. As you pointed out when he was on your program, they aren't endorsing him. Do they want to endorse against him? They want to advertise on his program. They want to go on his program and talk to his audience. Do they want him to, a guy who was news saying he's going to root out communists in Miami-Dade County? Do they want to be against him? So I think that's also made it potentially tricky for politicians who might endorse Manny Sid.
When I had Danielle Levine Cava in here, I pressed her on a number of issues, but she has high favorability. She got good marks for how she handled Surfside in the wake of that. So I think she's doing really well. Steve, I wanted to turn to some Broward races for a second, and you and I were going back and forth by email, and you were talking about a couple of school board races that are kind of interesting for you up there in Broward. Talk to me about that.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things to watch closely on Tuesday is the fact that 2 Republican appointees of Ron DeSantis. You remember that Ron DeSantis basically emptied out a good part of the Broward County School Board a couple of years ago and appointed 2 guys, Tori Alston and Daniel Fogenholy there, both in South Broward seats. They're both on the ballot. These are officially nonpartisan races, we know, but they're not really nonpartisan. Everybody knows who's a Democrat and who's a Republican. It'll be a huge coup, as I said in my column today, for DeSantis. If either one of these guys wins, I don't think either one of them is going to win.
Do you think, though, that are they advertising that they're DeSantis appointees, or are they trying to downplay the DeSantis appointees part?
They're downplaying it, and there's a lot of noise on social media that Alston is trying to confuse voters that he's really a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. He's a Republican. He's been appointed to a number of things by DeSantis. He's got a good political resume, but it's all, to a large degree, as a result of DeSantis's patronage, frankly. And so Ron DeSantis has to be the single most unpopular political figure in Broward County, bar none. So we'll see what happens.
I want to stay with you, Stephen, in Broward for a second. You know, in the same way that I said, why wasn't there more of a challenge to Danielle Levine Cava? Sheriff Gregory Toney, you know, with all of his myriad scandals, all the issues there, it seems like he's coasting to re-election at this point.
It does look that way. Part of that is because he's got a ton of money and he's got 3 opponents, none of whom are that well known. The candidate the Sun Sentinel endorsed, you know, is Steve Geller. Not the Steve Geller that a lot of you viewers will recognize, but another man by the same name, a career.
Not the former, what was he, state rep at some point?
State senator, he's now a county commissioner.
Yeah.
But Steve Geller, a longtime professional public safety expert, police officer. You know, it's one of these things where, and I've got a cautionary note for my friends in Miami-Dade. Dade County abolished an elected sheriff in 1966. I don't know how many of your viewers will remember Tal Buchanan, a notoriously corrupt sheriff here. And so
I think we put 3 sheriffs in prison in a row, back to back to back, before they switched it over.
It has been referred to as a 5,000-member political action committee, the Broward Sheriff's Office. It's excessively politicized, not just under Greg Toney, but among some of his predecessors as well. And you know, he's got access to the 6 o'clock news. He's got his name emblazoned all over the county. He's got a lot of money. He just opened this training center, which is notoriously, you know, was over cost. The cost overruns. So voters could surprise us, but I think Toney is probably more likely to win.
But Steve just set you up perfectly, because I wanted to turn to you to talk a little bit about the Dade Sheriff's race. As he says, this is the first time in going on more than 50 years, almost 60 years, that will be electing a sheriff. You know, the general consensus seems to be James Reyes is going to be the Democratic nominee. We're going to wait and see who the Republican is. There's a number of people who are vying for that seat. What sense do you make of this race?
I mean, what are there, 11 Republicans in the race? Yeah. I saw a poll yesterday, out of St. Pete polls, that said Joe Sanchez was leading with 16%. There's just so many people in the race. I have no idea how you handicap it. How valuable is Trump's endorsement? He endorsed Cordero Stutz.
The woman, Rosie Cordero Stutz.
Right.
But I don't know that she's leaned into that. Maybe I'm not getting those threads in that advertising, but it doesn't seem as if that's helping her much at this point.
Yeah, to be honest, I would not be betting on this race if I was a gambling man. So I really don't know how that's going to shake out. But I want to pivot to the Broward Sheriff's, what you were talking about with Toney for a second. Can you imagine if the Broward mayor appointed a sheriff and it turned out later that he had killed a guy? Mm-hmm. Would that police director still be there? Probably not. So the idea that it's more accountable to have an elected sheriff is a little, I'm not sure that the facts play out that way, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. I do want to turn. We started my block with Alex Rizo and with Chevron Jones talking a little bit about the condo thing. So I just wanted to close this half hour by talking to both of you about it. Steve, it seems that the legislature really doesn't want to do a special session when it comes to this condo issues. Talk to me about what they need to be doing.
Well,
if anything.
Yeah, I think this problem's going to get a lot worse, and I think the noise that you're hearing from retirees who are a very important part of the voter bloc in South Florida, the noise is going to get louder. They don't really have a solution. I personally don't think a special session makes sense for several reasons. We're too close to an election. The current presiding officers are cycling out in a couple of months. New people are coming in, including the new speaker, Danny Perez from Miami.
Who actually wrote the legislation that everyone is so unhappy with right now.
And DeSantis has tried this once or twice. It's not a good idea. You know this. You don't bring them back to Tallahassee for a special session without having some sort of template for a deal for what you're going to accomplish once you get up there. Special sessions can easily cause problems if you're not well organized.
All right, I gotta take a break here. We'll have you both on. I want to look ahead toward November, abortion, marijuana, all those sorts of issues. So we'll talk more in the next half hour. All right, when we come back, we'll take a quick look at the weather, because that's what you do on a Saturday morning. You look at weather. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's get a quick check of the weather with next weather meteorologist, KC Sherman. KC, if folks are heading to the polls today, it seems like they should probably go earlier in the day if I was listening to your newscast earlier.
Yeah, that's right. You know, we are going to see that chance for showers and storms pick up around midday. So if you're about to head out to the polls, we are going to be looking at some dry conditions likely through at least the early morning hours through about late morning, and even noon looking pretty quiet. It's as we get closer to about 2-3 o'clock that we'll start to see that rain chance pick up a little bit to about a 40% chance. So not going to be a washout today, but notice as we get closer to the afternoon, we'll start to see some showers and storms popping up. 1-2 o'clock, if you're heading out to the polls at that point in time, that's where we'll have the highest chance for showers and storms, the most coverage of our showers and storms. Of course, Miami-Dade County polls coming to an end at 4 p.m. At that point in time should start to dry things out, and we will continue to see things dry out as we head closer to 5, 6, 7 o'clock when the polls close in Broward County. Coming up in a bit, I'll have a check-in on the forecast for Tuesday for the state primary election in about the next half hour.
All right, thank you, Casey. When we come back, we're going to look ahead to the November election. Could Florida really be in play for Kamala Harris? And what about the amendments for abortion and marijuana? We'll get into all of that with our guests when we return. Stay with us.
Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome back to this special live edition of Facing South Florida. This morning, we're going to examine not only the races on the ballot Tuesday, but we'll also look ahead to November. Now, today is the last day for early voting before Tuesday's primary, so let's check in again with CBS News Miami, Steve Majiri, who is at an early voting site at the Miami-Dade election headquarters in Doral. Steve, not sure if things are starting to pick up there, but I also understand you've been looking at voter registration numbers across the state, and they really do favor Republicans these days, don't they?
That's right. If you look at the statewide total for registered voters, Republicans have a comfortable lead over Democrats and unaffiliated voters. But we did see that there are a lot of unaffiliated voters in this election, and that could really be the movable middle that candidates try to win over in the general election. And South Florida is a great way to take the pulse of the people. So we're going to take a look at the numbers here. Let's start out in Broward County. Registered Democrats outnumber both Republicans and unaffiliated voters by more than 200,000 each. What stands out is that there are more unaffiliated voters than Republicans. And now to Miami-Dade County, the number of Republicans and Democrats or unaffiliated voters are very close, but there are still more Democrats that are registered. And now finally, for the entire state of Florida, there are almost 1 million more registered Republicans than Democrats and almost 2 million more than unaffiliated. So again, a lot of unaffiliated voters here in Florida. Of course, they can't vote in the primary because it's a closed primary state, but in the general election, voters really could look to win them over. And as far as voting today, it's important to know it varies depending on what county you're in. Miami-Dade County, they've just opened up. They're going from 8 to 4, and in Broward, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Jim?
All right, thank you, Steve. All right, so let's bring in our guest again, State Representative Alex Rizo, chair of the Miami-Dade Republican Party. Earlier we had State Senator Chevron Jones, the Democratic Party chair, but he's lost in transit. He is somewhere on his way to Chicago for the DNC. We had him in the first half hour. We had to send him to the airport for this one, so it'll just be you and I. I want to start with those voter registration numbers, and one of the things I think is interesting, you know, when I started looking at it, so Republicans have about a 1 million voter advantage in registrations. With Democrats at about 4.3 million registered voters. In 2020, they had about 5.2 million registered voters. So they didn't all switch to Republicans. They did get purged. They did get taken off the rolls. State Senator Jones in the last half hour made some comments that basically thinking that this was part of the plan that Republicans had to clean out Democratic voters off the rolls. Again, I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Statements like that are patently false. People that were taken off of the rolls, they were nonpartisan affiliation. They were Republicans, Democrats. Again, it was all about election integrity and making sure that we have, for example, absentee ballots. Absentee ballots are requested now every year so that we make sure that people that have moved can get their absentee ballot where they go.
But why is that a good idea? If I'm used to getting an absentee ballot sent to my home because most people don't move every year, but a lot of people just sort of stay and they sign up and they expect the absentee ballot to come in. By having to request it every year, you're making it, you're putting a burden on people to do that. Why not shouldn't we be making it easier to vote? Honestly, but shouldn't we be making it easier to vote, not harder to vote?
Well, I think that it is easy. There's mechanisms in place. You can go online and request it. Number one, you can call, you can talk to someone, you can sign up for it. It's very, very easy. Anyone can fill it out and send it in. Again, election integrity. When you have ballots that are floating around to addresses that no longer pertain to people that live there anymore, you've got irregularities to start to happen.
Well, so tell me about all those irregularities. You had how many criminal cases came about as a result of these ballots flying all over the air? Were there thousands of cases, thousands of people sent to prison for that? I mean, I'm trying to understand. This seemed like a fix in search of a problem that didn't really have. There wasn't really a problem with the voting system in Miami-Dade. The governor said it was the safest system we ever had.
It is, and now we've made it even safer. So again, people could say that we took certain parties off of the rolls. That's absolutely false. It's not false. Okay.
All right. I want to look at
it is false. Excuse me.
On the good side for you, the latest fundraising numbers came in for the Republican Party of Florida. Raised in the last quarter $15.6 million compared to 2.4 million, 2.3 million for Democrats. Money is often a sign of party strength. We saw it with all the stories about fundraising for Kamala Harris and how much money she raised. So do you see that as a sign of the strength of the Republican Party?
Absolutely.
With the donations? Talk about why you think Republicans are so outpacing Democrats in terms of fundraising.
Well, it's number one, it's policies that have a good economy, a good state of Florida, a state where you want to go ahead and raise your children. Education, which is something that I'm very familiar with and I do a lot of in Tallahassee, is one of the top issues when it comes to what are we going to do with our future. We need this basis. We need a great economy. We've done, I think, remarkable things. The Republic under Governor DeSantis, under a Republican legislature, we've done wonderful things for the economy, for the elderly, for education, and I think we're going to continue to do that. And people see that and want to continue with that.
One of the stories that I did not too long ago was about how after the governor vetoed the hemp regulation bill to basically allow the hemp industry to remain active in Florida, that they pledged to be raising upwards of $5 million for the Republican Party. I haven't gone through the list here, but my guess is there's probably a few $1 million from the hemp folks in here. How did you vote on that hemp bill, by the way? You voted for it, right?
I can't. I think
the regulation.
I definitely voted for the regulation. Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
And then the governor vetoed it.
Yeah.
Were you happy with the veto?
No, I disagree with it. I mean, I voted the way I think it should go. And then we'll see. We'll leave it up to people and see where that goes.
It didn't hurt the Republican Party coffers. They got a few million as a result of the veto.
Possibly. Who knows?
So let's talk about the amendments coming up in November. I'm assuming, and I don't want to assume, are you opposed to both the marijuana and the abortion amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Talk to me about why you think a 6-week abortion ban is better to keep in place than going back to Roe for voters here in South Florida.
Well, I mean, I'm Catholic. The majority of South Floridians are Catholic. Look, I think that abortion is just used way too much. This is something, again, that should be between a doctor, a family, but really starting with a family. Well, the legislature is just saying, look, we think that this is just too rampant. It's used. The left is using this. They're saying that they can have abortions on site in Chicago now during the DNC. Vasectomies and abortions. I think that this is something best left to people, and really take a step back and say, look, this is not something that should be like the first option in anything. Again, life is sacred. Life is something that is very special. And again, I think that most people believe that.
I think most people who support abortion rights believe that as well, and would say that this should be an option for them. And 6 weeks, a lot of women don't even know. I mean, I always like when two men sit around talking about menstrual cycles, but as you and I both know, or hopefully know, that a lot of women won't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks.
Well, again, this is going to be left up to the people now.
Marijuana. What's your big concern there? The governor seems to make it seem as if we'll have San Francisco all over again, and you'll be walking through hazes of smoke. But the legislature could pass a bill that bans public smoking, right?
Yes, we absolutely could.
So tell me about your thoughts on the marijuana bill.
Again, recreational marijuana, I think I'm totally against. But again, we're going to see where people fall on this issue. Again, right now in South Florida, you go around and you can smell it all over the place. Again, I think it's a little overused, quite frankly. And again, recreational, I am totally against. We'll see where people fall on that.
Does Donald Trump win Dade County?
Yes.
Really? I mean, I know you sort of have to say that, but you believe that? And by how much? What do you think?
I believe that. How much? I don't know. A win is a win. Let's see. Obviously, there's more registered Democrats than Republicans in Dade County. However, the most important, and you alluded to this before, that MPA number, that's almost 500,000 people. Now, I have all of us in our state representative districts, we have NPAs. Some of them are the largest segment, some of them are the middle segment, some of them are the smallest segment, but they're very important. And so they could be the swing in this. I would say look at Doral. Look at where we're sitting right now. Doral 2 years ago in 2022, 24% of the electorate is Republican in Miami, in Doral. The largest segment of the voting bloc is NPAs, and Doral went Republican that year. So again, I say that this is the canary in the coal mine, and it's only gotten more Republican. By the way, those numbers right there, every single state House seat in Dade County went more Republican this last month during the final closeout.
I got time for just a yes or no. Does the legislature say supermajority? Or
Yes.
does it just come under supermajority?
No.
We stay. All right. There you go. We'll have you back after to see how your predictions are. All right. Thank you very much for coming in. When we come back, we'll be joined by two of my colleagues from good political reporters, David Smiley from the Miami Herald and Steve Busquet from the Sun Sentinel. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're joined once again by the editorial page editor for the South Florida Sun Sentinel, Steve Busquet, and the political editor for the Miami Herald, David Smiley. Gentlemen, you were both in the studio listening to State Representative Alex Rizo express confidence with regard to both amendments likely to fail. Let's sort of pick it up there with the amendments. But let me phrase the question this way: with Harris now at the top of the ticket, what impact does that have, you think, on the two constitutional amendments, the one for abortion and the one for marijuana? Steve?
Yeah, of course it's somewhat speculative, but it certainly increases the likelihood that more women are going to be voting because more women are energized by Harris being at the top of the ticket. That tends to make you think that the Amendment 4 would be helped by that fact.
But you're still skeptical. You're still not sure that it's going to get to the 60%. It's a high standard, 60%.
Yeah, I am a little skeptical because even though the polls do show 20% or so undecided, you need on an amendment like this that's highly controversial, you need to have a head of steam built up, because you've got to anticipate a well-coordinated opposition campaign. We're getting a lot of mail at my newspaper from the Conference of Catholic Bishops, from people in the medical community in South Florida who think that Amendment 4 is too extreme. I realize also a positive campaign to pass the amendment really hasn't reached full gear yet either. There's going to be a tremendous amount of focus on the presidential race here and every place else in the country. And so I still think the proponents have some work to do to get this thing passed.
David, on abortion?
Yeah, the proponents have wanted to keep the issue from being partisan and being wrapped up in Democrat versus Republican, because they want Republicans to vote for the amendment as well. So I do wonder if having Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket does give critics a face to put on the amendment, and whether that might be a problem for it. I also do think that the campaign against the amendment could be effective because it does open up, it leaves it to a mother and the doctor, and there's a lot of ways to attack that. So I do think it's 60% is a really high benchmark.
It's interesting, because I do think even nationally, how women vote in this upcoming election. And by the way, just on Republicans and the rest, we did a CBS News poll about a month and a half ago, which was when Biden was in the race still, and it showed not just Trump winning, obviously, the state of Florida, but it showed that there were a lot of Trump voters who are going to vote for Amendment 4 as well. There is that crossover. There is the Trump pro-abortion voter out there. Sure. And so that's going to be interesting to see. But the issue of women, I think, is going to be critical in this. And I think that in some ways the Trump campaign helps on Amendment 4 in the same way that you say Kamala Harris may hurt. I look at the RNC convention. We're going to have the DNC convention coming up. But when you look at the RNC convention, Dana White, who introduced Donald Trump, video of him slapping his wife, on down the line. I mean, J.D. Vance's comments on women. I think that it becomes an energizing factor for women, but we'll see. The marijuana amendment. Let me start. What do you think? How is that? They've got, talk about money. There's no shortage of money by True Leave and the proponents of marijuana to be able to try to get that across the threshold. Yeah,
I'm more fascinated in the anti-campaign and DeSantis sort of aligning with the hemp industry, apparently. Is he going to go to a vape shop and a kratom bar to campaign against the recreational marijuana amendment? So I'm really curious how effective his campaign is against the amendment. But I think for most people in South Florida, I mean, my neighborhood smells like weed already because of the medicinal market. So, I mean, the idea that it's going to change, I think that's kind of already here.
We need to get you into a better neighborhood, it sounds like. Steve?
This is a test of Ron DeSantis' ability to use the bully pulpit. He has moved or is moving quickly into lame duck status, whether he's going to admit it or not. And so, but he appears to be poised to put a lot of money and resources into trying to kill both these amendments. I think the proponents of the abortion rights amendment are on the most solid ground if they frame this as politicians are trying to take away your rights. Because I think that argument resonates, especially in this state, because of all the stuff DeSantis has done, the don't say gay stuff, the banning of books and all that. They're trying to take away your rights. When they get into the weeds of viability and at what point an abortion should be permissible under Florida law, that's where the politics get a little bit more complicated.
I dismissively said earlier, and I shouldn't just be as dismissive, that of course Donald Trump is going to win Florida, but let's go back to that for a second. Does Harris at the top of the ticket change the dynamic, Steve, in your opinion, in Florida at all? Is this still a Donald Trump safe state? And I guess the surest sign of that is nobody's spending a lot of money in Florida.
Right. I would say today it makes the race closer and more interesting, but Trump still wins. The Republicans have this big numerical advantage in voter registration. The Democrats still have an issue with, the enthusiasm gap appears to be closing because there's such a fire and enthusiasm about Kamala Harris. And your last guest, Alex Rizo, and you touched on something that I think is often overlooked, which is the importance of these no-party affiliation voters. They're a third of the electorate. they lean one way or the other on some issue. It might be the death penalty, it might be marijuana, it might be abortion, could be taxes. But the party that energizes those voters is in a really good place.
David, pick up on any of that.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen enough information to suggest that Harris at the top of the ticket changes things for the presidential race in Florida. But it might change things for down ballot races or constitutional amendments. I know there were a number of Democratic Congresspeople who were nervous about Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. They were going to have to spend a whole lot more money. Right. I mean, the story of the 2022 elections when DeSantis won Florida by 19 points and won Miami-Dade County, if you look at the numbers, it was more about, to me, the collapse of the Democratic Party than the surging of Republicans. And so can Kamala Harris bring back some of that enthusiasm that Joe Biden had clearly lost? I think probably there was nowhere to go but up, it seems. I'm waiting for the Harris-Walz head fake to Florida, because you know that has to come at some point. And I'm hoping, let them call me. I'll do an interview with either of them if they want to do a Florida head fake, try to get. But the map is totally different now. North Carolina, those Sun Belt states in play, going to be a fascinating November. We will keep talking. I want to thank you both for coming in. All right.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, when we come back, a quick look at weather, and we'll find out what the polls are, what the weather's going to be like on Tuesday. All right. Before we wrap it up, let's take another look at today's weather with next weather meteorologist, Casey Sherman. Casey, you're looking ahead to Election Day forecast as well, aren't you?
We are, yes. You know what? And it's not going to be too bad in the morning for Election Day on Tuesday. We have low-end rain chances through the first half of the day, but because we are going to be looking at a southwesterly wind kicking back in for Tuesday, that means higher chances for showers and storms will be for the afternoon. So as you get closer to especially 2, 3, 4 o'clock, that's when you'll have about a 40% chance of running into some of those spotty storms for Tuesday. Now, today actually kind of similar. We will be looking at drier conditions as we take you through the remainder this morning as those polls start out towards areas like Broward County. And notice as we get closer to about 2 o'clock, that'll feature our highest chance for showers and storms. Polls closing Miami-Dade County 4 p.m. We'll start to dry things out at that point in time. Our shower and storm chances will continue to dwindle through 5, 6, 7 p.m. as we head into this evening. And then, of course, those polls close in Broward County. So the name of the game here is try to get out and about a little bit earlier rather than later, especially around midday, is when we'll have that highest chance for showers and storms.
All right, thank you, Casey. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me about today's show at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.